No.
Escaped from Dartmoor Zoo and still hasn't been found.
Oh God! This is
It's obviously not Jewish, otherwise they were trying to lure it back.
Menu.
No, they were trying to lure it back by getting its mother to record his sound so that he can run back to his mother. But it didn't work.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm assuming everyone.
No, we were south, on the south coast.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We are in chapter 4, Midrash 4, and less than his texts.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
I just wanted to apologize to the group, but unfortunately I'm going to have to leave probably around 12:30. I'll try not to disrupt.
Which is, and I'm gonna kind of pick it up. I'm gonna do just one line of page Nun Dullard, and then we'll pick it up in the middle of Nun Hay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, not with lemon. We get with lemon already. Okay. So we were investigating the Rakia, and the problem with investigating the Rakia is that absolutely nobody has any idea what's going on, and it just tempts the rabbis into doing stuff which the passage of 1,500 years just renders entirely nonsense. So it's not a case of that wonderful idea that science tells us how things happen and religion tells us why or whatever. It's just we just have ancient science, but some of it's interesting, and this Midrash number 4 is part of a school of Midrash that we will see a number of times. So Kuti Echat Sha'al et Rabbi Meir, so that there are a number of interrogators of rabbinic Judaism who pop up. I think we've already seen the Matrona, right? Matrona is this sort of Roman woman of substance who has a backwards and forwards, and we'll meet a number of different people. Min Echat, we'll quite often see but here it's a Kuti Echat. Kuti is a Samaritan, and I just couldn't get online to do some proper etymological analysis on that, because they would call themselves Samaritan Shomrim, right? So the Shomrim is the kind of, I think, the accepted term for referring to Samaritans, but I think, and Kuti is, I think, dismissive. I'm pretty sure it's dismissive. What they would say is that they are the descendants of the biblically observant, not Jews, but the children of Israel from the Shomron, from the sort of the sort of northern kingdoms,
10 tribes.
the 10 tribes, or not, maybe not all of the 10 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim and a couple of the other tribes, who continue to operate true to their Torah-itic inheritance, but aren't part of the rabbinic tradition, right? So they split off around the time before the destruction of the first temple.
They didn't go to Babylon, did they?
Didn't go to Babylon. Yeah.
There are Samaritans in Eritrea.
Yeah, and there are a number of people who claim this Samaritan heritage. I think it happened last summer while I was away that we had a talk from someone.
You weren't here.
Yeah.
He came. It was very entertaining. He travels all over the place. He's one of their leaders. And I think, if I remember correctly, he said they were survived. They left. They came back after the exile. That they remained there. They were part of the lot that were destroyed. Or managed to avoid it, or came back afterwards. And they lived up in the hills, separate from all the tribe of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't regard themselves as Jews. They weren't part of Judah.
Well, see, exactly. Jew is the southern kingdom.
They were Israelites, as far as he was
Exactly.
And,
I mean, it's not quite consistent academically, but what I try and do when I'm using these terms is talk about Hebrew to apply to anybody before Egypt, right? So Abraham was the first Hebrew, and that 70, the 70 who went down to Egypt are Hebrews. Once they are in Israel, in Egypt, they become Israelites. And I would use that phrase, Israelites or children of Israel, through to the beginning of the rabbinic period, and I think it's only really appropriate to use the term Jew once you start getting into the rabbinic
In
period.
present-day Israel, would they be recognised for the law of return?
I think they are not. Sorry, they are not recognised under the law of return. But there are a number of Samaritans who live in Israel and are citizens of Israel. So I mean, Israel has two entirely distinct immigration residence type laws. There is the law of return, and then there is everybody else. So the famous case of Brother Matthew, who was this man who could claim Jewish genetics and should be able to make Aliyah under the law of return, was found not able to make Aliyah under the law of return because he was a practicing monk, but he was able to stay in Israel by some other kind of monk dispensation period of time that he spent there or whatever, so he kind of, became a citizen of Israel anyway.
And these are very different from the Karaites.
Karaites is a completely different thing. Karaites is a completely different thing. So I'm going to skip the first. The Midrash 4 are 3 questions of the Karaite of this Kuti, and I'm going to pick it up with the second question, the last word at the top line on page Nun Hey. And this we did last week, but let me just do it again in case you've missed it. So this is it's about, I guess, 7 or 8 lines down, Midrash 4, chapter 4. Amar Lo, this Kuti said back to Rabbi Meir, If Sha'ar Tosha Ketuv Bo, how is it possible, this thing that the verse says, which verse? The verse in Jeremiah, Halo et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz ani maleh. Is it not true that I fill the heavens and the earth? Hayamada be'em Moshe mi ben shnei vadei ha'aron. And it also says that God spoke to Moses between the 2 pillars of the Aaron, of the ark. How is it possible that God is both massive and small? Right, absolutely classic kind of Kuti min. Hi. Rachel, welcome. Lovely to see you. And you catch us in mid stuff. Hey, would you like? I am picking up with that word Amar, and if you want to follow in the English, Gerald might be able to just get you here. We're on questions asked by a Samaritan troublemaker to a rabbi, and the question is, how is it possible that God says about God's self, Halo et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz ani maleh, don't I fill the heavens and the earth? V'hamidaber im Moshe mi ben shnei vadei ha'aron, and that I speak to Moses between the two staves of the ark, that God is both massive and tiny. Amar lo, so the rabbi responds, Haveli morot gedolot, bring me a big mirror. And I think the right way to understand big is not necessarily big, but I can't remember this. Is it concave or convex? Yeah, which is that, concave or convex?
Convex is magnifying.
Convex. Bring me a convex mirror. Amalo. Re'eb vo'o shelcha Amarlo. Re'eb vo'o shelcha bahen. Re'a ota gedolo. V'amarlo. Re'a ota gedola. It says, look in this image of yourself in it. Doesn't it look big? And he then tells him, Amarlo haveli marok katanot. Bring me a concave mirror. Havelo marok katanah. He brings him this convex mirror. Amarlo reb vo shelcha bahen ra'at katana. Don't you now look small? Amarlo, says Rabbi Meir, Ma'imata ata basar v'dam, and you, this mortal creature of flesh and blood, you can change yourself in any way that you want. You can appear big or you can appear small, and you're only a mortal. The one who spoke and created the world, blessed be God. How much the more so? When God wants, I am the capacity and the size of the entire heavens and the earth, the Kshu runs there when he wants. can speak to Moses from
God
between
had
the
a
two.
shaving mirror, it's okay.
Had a Tarnhelm, like in Wagner's Ring.
He had a
Tarnhelm, which allows you to get small and big. In fact, that's part of the whole Wagnerian image.
Boy, I need to catch up on my Wagner. All right. Well, so I mean, it is the central theology behind this. I mean, it's always it's kind of cute to see these kind of disputes, but the central question of this is, I think, an incredibly important question for a monotheist, which is that if you are a monotheist and therefore God has to be utterly transcendent and beyond all capacity of the entire kind of corporeal, finite world, how is it possible to have an intimate relationship with God? Right? And most theologians give up on one or the other. And post-Rambam, most theologians would give up on the intimacy. So for when you read Rambam is great on the big gods. Malay et haaretz et shemayim ve'et haaretz ani malay, but not very good on the kind of the intimate personal relationship. Because it's very difficult to hold those two things together. It's a perfectly good problem. And if you know about the Sfirot and that kind of classic Kabbalistic way of looking at God, that God, how do you allow God to be both infinite and finite, immanent and transcendent? This is, Rudolf Otto, God is wholly other. Rabbi Jacobs, God is panentheist. It's much easier theologically to go for that, but very hard to hold both those two. I think the technical term is hendiades, like opposing ideas together at the same time. So,
because the Christians have a way of dealing with it very easily. That God sent down His only Son to be on the small, intimate side.
It's worse because that is God as well.
I know, but that evolves over generations.
So one of the much earlier ideas, the more primitive ideas, be a tribal God, a personal God, rather than transcendental.
That's very, very interesting. That's very, very interesting, right? The chiddush of Judaism is to turn God into
so much from later on.
Right. The singular creator of absolutely everything. I mean, you find this in kind of Hindu societies. They call anything God. I remember there was this one thing where they made a kind of like an idol of David Beckham, because it doesn't bother them. Anything's a god. Anything that is anything that holds any degree of importance at all, they'll deify. So everything kind of gets shunted up in that direction. And Judaism takes a very, very different idea. What I think is interesting about this answer, what is the answer to how can God be both be big and small?
Well, it's different in that this is a man-made solution, not something proven.
Okay, fine. I
don't know if that's what you're looking for, but
if I was a Kuti, I wouldn't be happy with that explanation.
Right. I mean, okay, it's a lousy explanation. Well, also because it's about an image, right? It's about an appearance. It's not about the reality.
It's trickery.
But I think the interesting thing is there's no answer. How is it possible for God to be both immanent and transcendent? God is both immanent and transcendent.
That's the thing.
It's like I got involved in I'm involved in a conversation with one of our members who's read my paper on same-sex marriage stuff and said, where is the edge of Torah? How come what Einstein and Isaiah Berlin says isn't Torah? And to which the answer is there's no epistemological category for defining Torah. I can't tell you. Well, Torah is just like the Shakespearean canon with the folio commentaries, and it's there's no epistemological category, and God is like that. I can't say, God's a bit like a purse. No, that's no good. God is no. There's nothing that compares to God. Ein kamocha, right? So the answer is simply the restatement of the question.
Well, it's also a silly question because it's easy to take the shot and to say it was Moses who was between the two pillars of the.
Well, there is this. I mean, there is this.
Not God.
No. But it does say that God spoke to Moses from between the Kruvim, right?
Yes,
and the Midrashim on that are very, very interesting, right? The origins of Simsum, rabbinically, are those midrashim. That God is capable of making God's self so small that God it can kind of like God can dwell in a finite place. How is that possible for an infinite God? It is possible for an infinite God, right? That is the kind of classic theological question of can God create a rock that's too heavy for God to lift? The answer is yes. How can God make God's self small? God can. There's no answer. It's just affirmed.
It's incredibly close-minded because all these things are things we can imagine. Imagine all the things we can't imagine.
But God can also do all the things that we can't imagine.
That's right. That's right. So how all the more so the things we can imagine should be
fine,
easy peasy for God.
Fine.
Right.
Right.
It's still not a proof.
Still not a proof.
But it depends on one's not temperament, how one feels at a particular time. Sometimes God is transcendental, and other times it's the opposite.
Right. I mean, what's interesting is there's I forget who it is. I think it's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, or it's someone. I mean, one of the interesting things about Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is that he spends a lot of time talking to non-Jews. Right, his job is the perfect contemporary corollary to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and that whole Gamliel family is the president of the board of deputies. Right? Like their job is to represent the Jews to the non-Jewish kind of world, and he gets involved in this whole thing. Quite a lot of it around Na'aseh Adam b'Tzelmeinu Kidmutenu, like let us make him, and the question, and he gives this answer, and then his students who are sitting around him say, "That's not a real answer. You pushed him off with a reed." Very, very interesting. Right, so the whole point is that the reed is not it's not like you pushed them off with an iron bar. You pushed them off with a reed. Like you may well have fooled this non-Jew, say Rabbi Gamliel's students, but you ain't fooled us. And in fact, worse, you've just awoken our minds to the kind of the terror of the problem. So these kind of questions between non-rabbinites and rabbinites, or Jews, non-Jews, Putim, Shomrim, rabbinic Jews, all that kind of stuff is here. Okay, we did all of that last week. We are now at the bottom line of page Nun Hey, would someone like to start?
Where does it say Nun?
Bottom line of page Nun Hey.
Oh, bottom
Amar
page.
Rabbi Chanina.
Alright, shall I?
Go for it.
Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Isi פעמים שאין העולם ומלואו מחזיקים כבוד
Keep going.
אלוהותו
Comma, and just finish it.
פעמים שהוא מדבר עם האדם מבין שערות ראשו
Pause.
ראשו.
Okay, let's have a go at that.
So said Rabbi Chanina bar Isi.
Yep. Lefamim, go for that.
Lefamim. Sometimes. Okay.
Right. So pam means like pamechat once, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not in there. But it doesn't say sheva pamim. It does say sheva pamim, right? He sticks his finger in the thing.
Yes.
Sheva pamim. Yeah?
Yes.
So
like
once.
times.
Yeah, times. Good. So lefamim sometimes. She'ein ha'olam umlo'o chazak kavod elohuto.
Can't contain
The
glory.
right.
Whoa.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. She'ein ha'olam umlo'o machazikim. Okay. Machazikim, like
Chazak. It's not strong enough. Think of that, the kind of Lurianic idea that as God trickles God's power into the world it just it combusts because it just can't handle it. For me, the best way of explaining that is the kind of the electronic, the national grid. That you have these sort of massive step-down transformers, but you try and plug. You plug your toaster into the main thingy and it blows. Like Lefamim, Amayim, like the world cannot contain God's power.
So Pa'amim shehu medaber im ha'adam. So sometimes
Shehu, that's God,
that
right? Shehu.
Shehu, that God
Yeah.
Can speak with man.
Good.
Mi bein sa'arot. I'm not sure what sa'arot
Yes, you
are.
do.
His
You do
hips,
know what it means.
between the hairs of his head.
Yeah, good.
So in such a small space.
Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, those of us. I mean, some of us here have. Such follicles as I possess, right, are rather broadly spread. But we, what do we know about God's hair? God's got a beautiful head of hair. Where do we know that from? Right. God has beautiful kind of locks of hair, but thick. Right. God has it's only poor people like me who don't have that. But that, in other words, it's the smallest possible space that God is sometimes capable of being so broad that the entire world cannot contain, and sometimes capable of speaking from between the follicles, as it were.
Interesting. And so Hadahu Dichtiv, so he brings the source text in Eov, which we don't have. Vaya'an Hashem et Eov min ha'sa'ara v'gomer.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about this last time. What happens, chapter 38 of Job?
It's the end.
You don't understand.
He's got to a bit.
No.
God tells him it's not up
Yes,
to you to
God is not.
understand it.
Right.
God is not in the world.
God
He is
responds.
not in the
God responds. Right? Beginning of the story, Job suffers. Middle of the story, Job complains. His friends try and solve the problem. Job refuses to accept any of the solutions of any of his friends. And then finally, chapter 28, God answered Job, translation in here, out of the whirlwinds. Sa'arot, spelt with a sin. No, spelt with a samach, right? That God's so this. I mean, it's the most important. It's the most important kind of moment, really, in the entire book of Job, where God finally turns up, and you're very excited as God turns up because you think you're finally going to get a solution, right? I mean, it turns out that you don't. But here is God speaking, and God speaks min hasa'ara, translated as from the whirlwinds, right? And I think we feel that, right? Our King James knowledge of the Bible is good enough to know that. But how is that? Can you see what's happening here?
Changing the sin to samach to a sin.
Good. How do I know that God is capable of speaking from the space between the follicles of a person's head? Because when it says V'ya'an Hashem et Eov min ha'sa'ara, he says from the hair. Option A, are they stupid? Option B, are they doing Midrash, right? Do they simply not know that Sa'ar is actually Sa'ar hair is spelled with a sin and Sa'ara whirlwind is spelled with a samach? Of course they know, but they're playing with that.
But that's not unique. There's plenty of songs in which there's no right word to put a sin in. They put a samach in, smechin.
Good. One of the kind of classic midrashim is that when God puts Moses in the cleft in the rock, sukkati, that God covers Moses, and that is spelt with a sin. But actually, it's read to be about the sukkah, right? Which is, of course, spelled with a samach. So it's an acceptable form of a gezerah shava. We're going to see a gezerah shava formally soon. A gezerah shava is one of the classic forms of rabbinic proofing something. That if a word appears in one place and that word appears in another place, you can prove what the word means in the second place from what the word means in the first place. That sounds fine. Watch out when the rabbis start doing it with the word davar, which appears here, meaning two people had to say a thing. Over here, it means that therefore you need two people to prove that someone is guilty of a crime before you kill them. Right? That's the origin of the need for two witnesses on a ketubah or everything else is a gezerah shava on the appearance of the word davar over here to the word davar over here. The rabbis themselves get very nervous.
The violence that they do to the language when they're playing their midrashic games, this is quite small.
Yeah, no, I don't agree. I don't agree. This is I don't agree. This is very, very significant because
it's rather contrived.
But they do this all the time. They change letters. They take a word and they change its meaning out of all recognition for its place.
They change its meaning out of all recognition, but it's very rare that they change the letters. Even a samach to a sin, and actually, I'd love to know if there was a Yemenite or a Tunisian, or a Libyan Jew to just to hear from them the difference between a samach and a
Sound.
sin. Because, you should never think that an aleph and an ayin sound the same. They sound dramatically different. And that's why that kind of classic midrash, Shema Yisrael, why is it a big ayin? So you shouldn't think that it's Shema Yisrael, perhaps Israel with an aleph. That is a, like, you just wouldn't have that. The way to hear the ayin, the sound of the ayin, is Afghanistan. Gaza. Sorry, I meant Gaza.
Right.
Which we actually write in English Gaza with a. It's so ga that it's actually transliterated into English with a G. It's an ayin is
Amorah
closer-
as well.
Someone's Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Something.
right. An ayin is closer to a gimel than it is to an aleph when properly pronounced, and actually the same with a chet and a chaf and a kuf and a kaf and a tet and a taf. When you hear someone who comes out of a kind of like a really, it was very interesting when my brother's part of a very, very Ashkenazi, very, very litvak, Harnof world, and I spent Shabbos with him, and and he took me to his minyan, and this very, very Ashkenazi guy was davening with proper pronunciation. The ayins were all properly ayined, and like something's happened to Ashkenaz Judaism in Israel, even the Lithuanian, Litvak, Yiddishist kind of Judaism, that when they read Torah and when they're davening, they are now pronouncing things properly. Very, very interesting. But this is a great. I think this is rare and extensive, even by. I grant you, they do a lot of stuff, but this is.
But
big.
it's rather the logic is rather contrived, isn't it? When they,
Of course.
Well, but again,
Midrash.
well, I don't know what contrived means. The interesting thing about the speaking out of the whirlwind, which then reminds us of, right, and God wasn't in the, God wasn't in the, and God wasn't in the, like it's all intertextual in the context of all of that, is how does God, like, deal with the imminent? Like, by this point, we're fine with God being transcendent, but like, how does God deal with the imminent? And even God's deigning to speak to Job, even to say to Job, "Putz, what can you possibly understand about the operation of the universe?" Even that is already a kind of a massive concession to the kind of human need for some kind of intimacy and relationship.
Is there a contrast in Job? I just remembered a while ago, but with Satan in Job, it is. There's a whole thing that he is called Hashatan, right? There's a Hasatan.
Yeah.
But isn't there a contrast there as well? That this is that I can't remember. Is it an S or is it a samach? So isn't there something in that too?
Sarah and Satan.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of anybody playing with those ideas. I mean, what's so interesting about the beginning of Job is that it does change everything. Right, God sits there and says, I created the heavens and the earth, and how can you possibly understand? And I did mountains and volcanoes, and you're sitting there worrying about your personal, like you can't understand the complexity of them. But we know why Job is suffering because we've read chapters 1 and 2, and in chapters 1 and 2, basically, in that kind of Christa Berg song, God plays cards with the devil, and the devil's hiding a thingy up his sleeve. This gives me an opportunity to pitch for what we're doing for Slichot this year.
Yes.
We are doing for Slichot this year a kind of staged reading of Yud Lamed Peretz's short story of Satan and the Cantor in Hell, or whatever it's called. But in that short story, Yom Kippur in Hell, Satan goes to God. Satan goes to God and says, "Let me take out this Cantor." And God goes, fine, you can't kill him, but you can do this, and it's all about Job. So I mean, it's if you're interested in that beginning part of Job, come and do that. Okay. So we're really in this business of the immanence and the transcendence at this point, and now, and I think that's really, really interesting, Midrash. Now we've got the third of these three questions of the Kuti. Can you see where we are? Va'od she'elo, yeah.
Ve'od. We just have the Sarod Rosh.
Maybe. Where are you for 12:30, by the way?
I think it's going to be delayed, so I'll be able to stay longer.
Good.
But you can go with somebody else.
Yeah. Then somebody else want to read?
Okay. Ve'od she'elo, another question. Omalo. Efshar Peleg Elohim Malay Mayim quotation
Right,
from
Tehillim.
Tehillim.
Keep going.
Misheshet Yemei Bereishit V'lo Chaser Klum.
Huh? Right. So this is the question. Do you want to, how are you doing with that?
Peleg.
Those of you who have English, let Lester suffer. It's not fair to sort of solve Lester's suffering by showing that you have the English in front of you.
Peleg says
Half, right? Or separated or divided. Or but here being understood. So it's 65 tens. Translated here as full, right? Peleg Elohim Male Mayim. That God rendered full.
Well, that's Malay.
That's Malay.
So
Peleg a person.
That enriched it with the river of God, which is full of water. We don't really know what Peleg means, right? Peleg meaning Peleg. Well, we're going to understand it as half or separated. So we'll see that we've got a verse that's coming. So we'll use it at the end. Right, that somehow God is doing something to this water, this river, which is Male Mayim.
No. And
this
so
water, this river has been flowing.
He says, "Misheshes Yemei Bereishit v'lo chaser klum."
Right, God has been pouring water into this river from the 6 days of creation, and there's still no less God. Right, God has been pouring water down this river. God is responsible for the water being in this river, and there is no less water in God.
Where is that? What Tehillim says that.
Tehillim 65:10. Thou visited the earth and waterest it. Thou greatly enriched it with the river of God, which is full of water.
The dilemma they're posing in the translation is it possible that the river of God is full of water since the 6 days of creation and it's not been diminished?
Right. So it's God's river, and God is providing the water for this river. No, and it is not diminished. It is God.
No,
right?
no,
How
it says the river, the
says
water.
the river.
Yeah, but then that's a mistake. V'lo chasar klum amaha. It's God. That's. I mean, I've cheated. I've read on. Right? How is it possible for God to be? Let me use this image. Sweating out water. I'm using that image advisedly. How is it possible for God to be sweating out water into this river, been sweating it out for 5,000 years, and there's still no lessening of God? Right? So this is, again, we're playing with these ideas about immanence and transcendence. How is it possible for God to be kind of like putting stuff into the corporeal world without losing anything from God's godsness?
By the way, Peleg, according to Google Translate, is stream or brook.
Right.
So it's the stream or brook of God is filled with water.
Right. So this is v'lo chasar klum amaha, and there's no lessening of God. Right? How can God fill up God's river with water without there being a lessening of God? This is Isaac Newton's.
But if God is infinite, then it's not a problem.
Well, this right. I mean, that's going to be your well.
If God is infinite, you
but
take a little bit away from an infinite amount, and you still have an infinite amount.
Yeah. At what point in history did we work out how to deal with infinite?
I think philosophically, wouldn't they have been satisfied with that?
Well, right, sort of. I mean, something that's going to be the answer. I mean, well, actually, that's not quite going to be the
Is
answer.
there a
The
Hebrew
answer's gonna
word for
be
infinity?
Ein Sof,
Ein
which is perfect. But I mean, you can understand the problem from a Cooties perspective, right? You know, so who's the Cootie? I mean, the Cootie's not going to win, right?
No.
All we need to do is just.
He didn't write the book, so whoever wrote the book is going to win clearly.
Right, but I mean, it's a perfectly good problem. So what's the law that there's no creation and no new? No, there's nothing. Nothing is created new. Everything has to go.
Yeah.
Is that Newton? Can't remember. It's not Newton.
Oh, your conservation of mass.
Right. It's a question about the conservation of mass. That's the question.
Yeah, but we know where the water comes from. We know scientifically the water evaporates from the sea, goes up into the clouds.
Well,
we know that.
Right.
But I'm sure they knew that as well.
No. You watch this, and they are They do not know the laws of conservation of mass. Let's go on. Here comes the answer. Once we see the answer, we'll see that they completely do not understand basic
They think
science.
the rain comes out this.
Well,
They think the rain comes from
let's look at the answer.
We
No,
had-
no,
we
don't,
had-
you got too
But
far ahead.
But
Slow
last
it
week
down.
we had the idea of this clock that let water through, and that's what they like.
Yeah, they
it
get
to rain.
yeah, but this is not a conservation of mass issue. Let's do the answer that is given by Rabbi Meir back to this PC, and we'll see.
Is that Aristotle and infinite matter? Matter. Is that Aristotle?
No, I thought we were getting for Aristotle, but it turns out we're not. But let's
Okay.
see this answer.
Okay, the answer is Amalo. Hikanes kam urchotz ushakol atzmacha ad shelo tikanes. Umeachar shetikanes halach kevan shiyatza v'shakal atzmo lo chaser klum.
Pause there.
So he says, go in,
Right.
wash.
Right. Don't think swimming pool. Think schwitz. Right. Go and have a schwitz. Go and sit in the sauna. Right. And Roman. Right. I mean, go into the schwitzing place.
Ushakol atzmacha.
Right. Ad shalotikanes.
So what?
And shikul.
Weigh yourself.
Weigh yourself. Ad shalo tikanes. Umeachar shetikanes. Weigh yourself
Beforehand?
before you go into the schwitz and after you go into the schwitz. Halach.
Halach.
Off he
went,
goes.
did it.
Right.
Kevan shiyatza, when he came out, v'shakal atzmo, lo chaser klum. He didn't weigh any less.
Right. He'd been sitting there schwitzing, and all this water's coming off him. When I said that God imagined sweating, he was, this is the answer. He got back on the scales, and he still weighed.
Wasn't a very accurate scale.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
that's the point, right?
Yeah.
So that's the point about
Way
conservation of matter. They completely
No,
do not
It's not.
understand.
It's not the accuracy of the scale. It's the significance of the amount of water over the whole.
Well, listen, the answer.
The
I
scale
mean, like,
is
you,
accurate
I mean,
enough.
what,
You will
what's
see the
spend-
loss of weight.
Of
Yes.
course, but
If you spend time in a schwitz, your weight goes down.
right,
Sure.
and they are simply unaware of that.
Really? I didn't.
Or he's using
Or
it
he's-
to push back the kuti.
Yeah, or he's fooling the kuti. He's playing with it. He's
go in there for 5 minutes, kind of thing.
yeah.
Whatever. Like the answer. I mean, So yeah, let's just finish this off. We'll see what we'll see.
Amalo. Kol ota hazaya sheyatzat lo mimachai yatzat. Everything which, I guess the
Zayah?
sweat, which went out, didn't come out from you.
Didn't it come out from you?
Lo mimachai. Amalo, hein.
And he said,
Shkur, yeah.
yeah, the sweat came from you.
Amalo uma ata shata b'savi adam lo chaser me'ayancha klum. Now you can understand. You who are just a human being, you lost water, but you still didn't lose any weight.
Lo chaser. What's ma'yan?
A fountain.
A fountain. That's so interesting. Right? What's the body? The body is a fountain out of which pours sweat. I mean, it's kind of fabulous. You mortal person, there is nothing lost from your fountain. Right? You go into the schwitz, and there's. I mean, it's just wrong, right? But let's.
Ma'ano shelakodesh baruch hu achat kama v'kama. Heavy peleg Elohim malei mai.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
So
oh.
the fountain, which is God's, how much the more so God's not going to lose godness by quotes sweating quotes since the Sheshim Bereishit, since the 6 days of creation down to this,
I can't
to this river.
believe that Rabbi Meir believed that. I think he was just giving a silly argument to the
a silly
Kuti.
Fending him off. Yeah.
Because I think, if you take a grape and you let it dry, or a bunch of grapes, you let it dry and become raisins, and you will weigh and you will see that the raisins weigh less than the grapes.
You know what?
He must have known that. This is an agricultural society. He must have known that.
I mean, it's such a good question because it's really asking this question that Gerald, you and I have been up on since the beginning, which is when the rabbis say stuff, are they being playful or do we, we don't know, we can't read irony, we can't read pedagogy, right? Or not pedagogy, but just I can't be bothered to deal with this question. The answer is, because God wanted to punish the small, the parents, so God therefore killed the small child. Like, does that if you ever see a rabbi ever say that, is that a sign that the rabbis believe that God killed small children to punish parents? Or is it, just something that slipped out in some kind of conversation because the rabbi couldn't be bothered to go into, or felt that this particular person... I mean, I'll give you a personal example. I was walking back from a funeral and somebody came running up to me, grabbed my elbow and said, I always ask this of rabbis at funerals, when I die, will I see my parents in heaven? And I kind of was like, he said, because I asked Rabbi this question and they said yes. Mm-hmm. Will I see my parents in heaven? Now, at that moment, I'm forced to do like a pastoral analysis, a pedagogic analysis, this, that, and the other, and you have to make a decision as to whether or not you can kind of engage with a more serious kind of a theological discourse or not. Added to which, my job at that moment is to continue looking after the funeral because I've got, 40, 50 other people, including a bereaved family, who are dealing with the loss of their whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And, what I said at that moment is not what I genuinely believe. Actually, what I did say was what I genuinely believe, which is I don't know. I mean, I have a belief that it's not the end, but I don't know. To which this person said, what kind of rabbi are you? That's a good question.
Honest,
Mr. Spock said it great. He said, to discuss the afterlife, I would need a common frame of reference.
Right. And then this adult, I guess he was 40. This adult's carer came up to me afterwards and said, I hope that Johnny wasn't disturbing you. He finds these things very difficult. Because
don't we all?
Don't we all? But so we don't know this, and that question about how do we treat what they say. The rabbis don't say, I am being poetic in the following image. God spoke from between the follicles on a person's head. We just don't know if they're being stupid or if they're being... they're just... and again, it's about epistemological categories.
We have to, if we're going to take this seriously, we have to believe that they're being playful, they're trying
I don't
be
know.
Poetic.
I don't know. And actually, you know what? This is PhD. This is the question that you're asking is a PhD standard question, which is how much science do these guys know? And you would need to know all of rabbinics to kind of do the rabbis understand conservation of matter? If that's the answer, then we've done really well. All right, let's finish this up.
Okay, so have a
and so this business that God, right? God being God isn't diminished. This is Heve. This is the meaning of the verse.
Peleg Elohim Malei Mayim Misheshet Yemei Bereishit Velo Chaser Klum.
So this river of God, it's full of water from the 6 days of creation, and there's still no less God.
I think this is yet another answering the kuti with a reed.
I can't disagree with you. I can't disagree with you. Maybe what's interesting is that the previous answers have all been pretty schwach, right? The mirror question is a pretty schwach. I'm not fooled if I see a reflection of someone in a convex mirror and they look larger. It doesn't. I don't really think that the person is larger, right? So maybe none of these answers are particularly. Maybe Rabbi Meir was having an off day.
But did the earlier commentaries on this Mishnah, on this Midrash, did they take it to? Did they believe that the rabbis were?
You are not going to find in classic rabbinic commentary a rabbi from the medieval period saying that a rabbi from the Talmudic period didn't know what they were talking about. No. That's a question for the academy.
But he could say that he was being poetic. Another later rabbi.
Very rare. Right. Yeah. But not common. Not common. And those kinds of things I think are quite rare. I've written on that once, by the way. I wrote an article about Reish Lakish. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, let me know. I think I've sent that to you about whether or not Reish Lakish really means what he says.
Well, but that's another way of saying is he being poetic? This is maybe their way of being precisely that, poetic. But they don't have a word for it.
Yeah, they don't have, right, Swiss Cottage Library. You walk up the stairs, to your right is fiction, and to your left is non-fiction. Like, they don't have those categories. and you just have to acknowledge that they just don't, like they're not interested in that kind of a distinction because it's pre all of that, right?
So what? Sorry, what? When was this? When was this written?
So Rabbi Meir is a Tana. Rabbi Meir is alive in the first 2 centuries of the Common Era. The conclusion of the redaction of Bereishit Rabba as a text is somewhat later, is late 5th century. But we could look at whether or not this kind of stuff appears elsewhere. No, it doesn't appear anywhere in the Gemara. It appears in a whole bunch of rabbinic stuff. But interesting, right? So on page Nun Vav, on the page that we're on, Min HaSa'ara, right? Mi Ben Sa'arot Rosho, right? So that thing of reading the whirlwind as between the hairs, look in Baba Batra 16a. So actually, that is a Talmudic play. So once that's kicking around, other people are capable of using it. So but it doesn't appear to be Tanaitic in origin. I mean, I'll look that up actually because I do find this stuff interesting. And also in Nida, right? It appears twice in the Talmud, which means it's probably older, right? The older stuff is, the more times it will pop up across the Talmud. Thank you.
Should we finish this?
Yeah.
Omar Rabbi Yochanan has perhaps a different view. Natal HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kol Memei Bereishis. He took all of the waters of creation, Unetanam, and he put them Chetziam.
Or set Chetziam Barakia.
Put half of them in the Rakia, Chetziam Okeanos. Okeanos, I don't know.
Nice Greek word meaning
ocean.
Meaning what?
Ocean, I would have thought.
Ocean. Yeah, can you see it?
Okay.
That's interesting, right? That's the soft sound being transliterated into Hebrew with the kuf, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know enough about that word in Greek. It'll be right. Anybody got any Greek?
Yeah.
No.
Yay! Keep going, Lester.
Hadahu dichtiv peleg Elohim malei mayim palga. Palga is a half, isn't it?
Good. Right, so God. So Rabbi Yochanan said that God put half of it in the heavens, half of the water in the heavens, half of it on the earth, and the Peleg Elohim means that God palga, God split the waters between the heavens and the earth. Some Okeanos. Oh, it doesn't even give it to me. That's not.
Peleg does mean river as well.
Well, in that it means a splitting off the main river, a brook or a stream. That's probably the etymology there.
Very nice.
True.
Very nice. Very interesting. Very rarely I don't have the Greek here. I think it's just such a common word. Okeanos. Is that Okeanos there?
No.
No, it's I don't think it's there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Something else.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Someone else to read? Do you mind having a go? Feeling brave? I hope you are.
I need
No?
to
Okay. All right.
practice.
Rub off some of that rust.
Yeah.
Anybody? Go on, Steve. Keep.
Okay. Next, Harakia Dome Livrecha. The Rakia, whatever that is, resembles Brecha. Brecha is
A pool of water, right?
a brook.
No. Well,
a pool.
A pool. Good.
Ulamala min habrecha kipa mechamat kipa mechamat shahabrecha mizat tipim avot.
Pause there.
Okay, so the Rakia. Now, are they trying to explain what the Rakia is?
Yeah,
now?
we're still all over the place with this rakia, right? We know that it's got something to do with water. because we've got waters above it and waters below it, and last week we had whether or not the waters were touching it or not touching it. But here we go. So we're calling it a brecha, and there is a kippah, and the whole point of it is that it's kind of like a dome, right?
There's
Some kind of sort of
covering of some
Right.
sort. Umechamat.
biglal. Biglal, because, right? Or as the bracha ma'azat tapim avot, as the brecha again
Sweats the clouds or sweats?
tipa drops, right? And by the way, anybody interested in the clouds, you have to watch this Imagine on the One Night in 2012 on the opening ceremony from the last Olympic Games. It's beautiful, really lovely. Okay, end of diversion. Right, and because right, and the brecha, this heavenly rakia, is sweating through these fat drops, right? The hain, keep going.
But is the avot? Are they clouds?
No, they're fat drops.
Fat. V'hein yordin letoch mayim hameluchim ve'einan mit arvin.
Good.
So these fat drops fall to the water of
the salty waters, into seawater, right? So they know that rainwater is non-salty, but the rainwater falls down into the salty water,
and they don't dilute or
well, they're not mixed in, right? They're not mixed in,
Separate.
right? So
they're not mixed in.
Yeah, I have to say, this is very strongly against your claim for the scientific kind of credibility.
Yeah.
What they think is that there is such a thing as salty water, and there is such a thing as fresh water, and when the fresh water falls into the salty water, it remains distinct.
But how could that? But that just goes against their observations. When they go into the sea, the water is salty. They haven't found any sweet water in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, but they think that this salt water this fresh water is lying there in the. It's like you've got salt water and mixed water. When you drink the two together, it does all taste salty.
They must have a theory
But
for
the drops themselves remain distinct because the stuff that comes from the rakia, is fresh water.
Right, well, that's easy enough to understand, to explain. There is water and there is salt. And in the sea, the water remains water and the salt remains salt.
They think that there is salt water and there is fresh water, and those are.
Individual objects.
I'm aware that I'm disagreeing about chemistry.
He wasn't doing
about what the rabbis thought about.
Okay. Right. I mean, I would like to consider myself to be a fine upholder of how great the rabbis are. I don't, and actually, and it would be good to know something about the history of science. At what point did people understand, the water cycle of evaporation? At what point did people understand the nature of salt and salt water and fresh water? Like, it just seems to me like, certainly at this point in this midrash, they don't understand.
You read on because they're talking about the water of the Jordan mingling.
Not mingling.
Not passing through.
Passing through
the lake and not mingling.
Not mingling with it.
Not mingling with it.
You would have thought they would have understood. Because it's quite late, isn't it? We're talking about 200 years
but
CE.
I don't know what that. I just don't know enough about the history of science.
But they would have observed that if you take a bowl of salt water from the sea and the water evaporates,
it
you
becomes
get the
more
salt.
salty, and you get the salt left. Well, yeah, sort of, but but they think that
But
the big salt pillar, they think that the big salt pillar on the side of the Dead Sea is lots wide.
Yeah.
I mean,
And they didn't think that the rain arrived in that way. They thought it came from the waters that were up in the firmament.
Yeah, that I can
getting
understand.
through.
I think, and listen, and of course, and if you read, and not from nothing, they think that the seawater and rain come from are two entirely distinct
things.
categories,
Yeah, I can
because
understand.
that's what it says in the good book. I mean, I just think they don't. I just think they just don't know what they're talking about. And therefore, what time is it? You're interested in a little bit of, slight diversion. Maaseh Shahaya, question that I got asked. Woman has been estranged from her first husband for 5 years, right? Meanwhile, first husband has gone off and remarried civilly. She now wants to get married. She realises that she needs a get. She's trying to get the get sorted out so that she can get married in such and such a date. And she's worried that she's not going to get the get within 92 days of the chuppah. She knows that if she doesn't get it, she's not getting married. But she thinks she's going to get the get kind of here, and this is 90 days, and we're now, by the way, back up here. And there is a halacha that you don't marry someone within 92 days of the delivery of the get. And it was a perfectly good idea, because you're concerned about mum's roots and you don't know if she's pregnant and all this kind of other stuff, back in the rabbinic period. It makes no sense in the context of A, the scientific developments of where we are in terms of paternity and everything else, and contraception and all these kinds of other things, and also in terms of a sort of social reality that people start living separate lives earlier than was the case. And God help us, we should certainly be in this place, that you don't get men forcing themselves on their otherwise estranged women and having intercourse late into relationships that have otherwise broken down, right? I mean, so the question was asked to me as a Masorti rabbi, which is, what is our Masorti position on this 92-day waiting period? To which, and actually, I spoke to Chaim about it because I didn't want to kind of go on my own on it. We're not makpid on it. We're not careful. We're not so strict about that, because it's a protection as opposed to a din. But within orthodoxy, it's rabbinic rather than derived, sure. But but within orthodoxy, what they say is, since the 90-day thing applies when a 60-year-old woman gets divorced and wants to remarry, therefore it's not about the reality of a child, and therefore and what it's about is whether or not you allow rabbinics to be in development kind of superseded, and and therefore does that make you feel that the rabbis are idiots, or do you still love Shabbat, still love kashrut, still love davening in Hebrew, and still hold some things that feel kind of odd, but where are they? We're right into the very nature of what it means to be a Masorti Jew when we read this kind of stuff and decide what to do about it, because the classic Midrashic commentaries would save this, would show that actually, I don't know quite what they would do in this particular case. They'd show that actually this is not crazy science, or they would say that don't pay attention to the science because the rabbis know more than the scientists, because the rabbis have nevuah-like qualities. So we're really all in this. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I am doing on Wednesday nights. I'm teaching this Jews Like Us class. And I'm going to be looking at the origins of ultra-orthodoxy as a response to modernity, which is precisely this kind of move against modernity, almost what's a bit of politics? Govian, right? We've had, like that you reject expert advice because what you feel almost religiously is correct, right? And we'll see that in ultra-orthodoxy. There's just a little bit more. Would you mind, Lester, if I did this? Amar Rabbi Yonah, al titma hadeni ardena avar b'yama de Tiberia v'lo mitarev ba. Rabbi Yonah says, don't be surprised, this idea of the non-mixing in of the waters, because this river, the Jordan River, it goes straight through the Tiberias, and the water that went into the Tiberias doesn't mix in with the water that's in the Tiberias. It comes out the south of the Tiberias again. In other words, my proof that what I just said isn't odd isn't, you know that the water that flows into the Tiberias kind of, remains
there's a channel.
They knew enough to know that that's miraculous. If they're believing that to be true,
Maaseh Nisim yesh b'davar, right? This is a Maaseh Nisim there is in this thing. Adam koveh hitim or teven bivra bichora ad shelo yardu shtayim shelo etzbaot hemet aravin. That when a person starts threshing wheat or grain in a sieve, it only goes like wheat. I mean, literally, it says until it's fallen 2 or 3 fingers, it's mixed in. But like here, you've got this sort of big thing, and you drop a couple of things in, it's gone, right? Ve'elu mahalachim mahalach kama shanim ve'emit arvin, right? And but on the other hand, this meaning these waters that descend from the heavens, they go for several years. How long does it take the water to fall from the heavens to the earth? Several years the water is falling and falling. The Amit Arvin, and the water remains distinct in individual droplets. Very nice, right? That God for several years is letting the water come down, and every droplet comes down distinct from the heavens. They do not understand precipitation.
No, but why did they believe, he's taking this as a given, they believed that the water that comes into Tiberias from the Jordan comes out of Tiberias as the Jordan without having any interaction with the other water?
Right? The proofs don't go in order because you're trying to miraculous eyes the world. You attribute miraculous stuff to stuff that isn't miraculous.
But they actually believed that there was no mixing in Tiberias.
From this, I mean, like, to be honest,
they knew enough to think it was miraculous. They expected it to mix, but they thought it...
Well, I think because they know that if a human being pours water into a thing, it
mixes.
Adkan, we are, forced to confront. Right, I mean, let's throw,
I'm not talking about science. You see, I'm talking about
experience.
About experience of people in the year 200. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
The fact that they thought it was miraculous though, suggested their experience.
But the fact that they thought it was true, first of all.
We don't know why that is.
I can see that if they believed that it was true, that they would think it was miraculous. Yeah. But why did they believe it was true?
Well, they just don't like mixing.
Because they
The
obviously...
idea of
because of the scriptures that as they were interpreting it, they thought was telling them that.
Can I just do one quick thing? And Rachel, you're a little too early into this to definitely have to play. I would love to teach some Midrash on Shabbat Shuvah at a sit-down Kiddush, and we'd love to do some veggie cholent. And if there is any chance that this kind of collective might be perhaps interested in chipping in for some cholent, so we can all sit and learn some Midrash together on the Shabbos and share some of this. Vegetarian cholent. On Shabbat Shuvah. So whatever that is, the kind of 29th of September.
It'll be in October this year.
Cholent was made for Shabbos. You put it in the oven before Shabbos comes in, and you leave it there in the hot oven till Shabbos.
So if anybody's interested in sponsoring a little bit of chillin', that would be lovely. No rush. We know where to find you. But thank you very much. My apologies for next week. It's mine. I am up doing teaching Midrash at Noam Camp, but I will be back the following week.
You'll get some more sensible answers there.
or more difficult questions.
Yeah, more difficult questions.